Welcome everybody. Good afternoon, Austin. How's everything going so far? Woo! All right. So we'll talk today about delivering your service on PKS. Legal mumbo jumbo. I'm looking into my crystal ball about the future, and what I say might not come true. So, just so you're aware. So to introduce myself, my name is Mikey Bolt. I am on a team at Pivotal called Platform Engineering. We are actively brainstorming new team names because that probably doesn't mean what you think it means. Our mission is to extend the Pivotal platform and make it suitable for more applications. In the past few years, that has meant working with ISV partners to fill our marketplace. And over those years, we've added 144 ISV partners to our program. We have launched 82 products, and we have had customers and people download those products over 32,000 times. So that's kind of the perspective I'm coming from here as we shift gears kind of more towards PKS, like we've been hearing a lot today. We're gonna see what that means for you as people delivering services. Anybody here ISV partner in Pivotal's program? Not many, a couple. All right, so this should be interesting. Okay. My pointer stopped working. Okay. So a little overview of what we'll talk about. First, let's start with the basics. What is a service? We'll give a little definition around that. It can mean a lot of things in a lot of different contexts. So we'll set the stage for today. We'll motivate you a little bit about delivering your service on PKS, why that might be a good idea for you and for the world. We'll talk briefly overview of all the different kind of phases or things that need to happen in order for you to deploy your service on PKS. So about actually deploying your product to Kubernetes, brokering your service if that's something that applies to you, delivering the bits to the customers that want your products, and then some logistics about our partner program and the just logical steps that you can get through the process with Pivotal to deliver. So first definition, what is a service? So for the next hour, a service is not going to be a Kubernetes service object. This is a technical term in the Kubernetes world, and that's not what we mean today. We're not talking about a microservice architecture or an architectural related service than that means. And we're not talking about an end user application. So what are we talking about? So if we look up service in the dictionary, actually I didn't do that, this is 2019 and we're at a software conference, so we Google it, right? And that day that I Googled it, I felt very lucky because Google actually had a user study about service terminology as it applies to cloud platforms. And their definition of a service ended up with something that operates independently, so something running outside of my application. It's something that is opaque, so as an application developer, I might not have all the details on how the service is doing what it does. It's not necessarily something I can see into. It's a black box. It sends and receives requests, so there's communication between my application and the service, and it performs a defined business function. So when we think about the term service, this is what we're talking about today. There's a little bit more when it comes to the Pivotal platform, what a service means. Going to go a little deep here. On the Pivotal platform, we think of two personas that typically engage directly with your service. One is the platform operator, who manages or makes your service available, and the other is the application developers who are hopefully self-service provisioning and using your service in their applications. So on a Pivotal platform, we tend to think of this as a very high ratio of developers to platform operators. We try and strive for about 4 platform operators for every 1,000 application developers. So that scale is important to our customers, and it's part of our story of Pivotal platform, really. So most of what we'll talk about today will apply to everything under that Google service umbrella, and then there's a little bit extra for things that fit this service on Pivotal platform definition. Okay, so why would I want to deliver my service on PKS? I think the first and the simplest reason is, what's my motivation for doing this? It's your salary, much like Alfred Hitchcock was telling actors. So what does that mean? So there's this thing called Kubernetes, if you haven't heard, and it's kind of taking over the world and solving all the world's problems, and it's got all the answers to life's persistent questions, right? So I kind of went through a struggle as Pivotal and the industry in general was really, it seemed like there was this huge hype around Kubernetes. I was kind of trying to understand, why is this taking off so much? Why is this such a big deal? And we heard a lot about what our plans were for building on Kubernetes and evolving our platform to run on Kubernetes and these things, but like, really, why? Is it just people asking for it because it's big, the new hot thing, and it's hype? And what it took for me to get an answer to this that actually made a lot of sense was Chad Sakic, who's our lead of sales in the US. He said, what? Kubernetes is an industry standard, and enterprises love industry standards. There's many reasons for that. One of them is that they can use it and not get locked into a vendor, right? Multiple vendors have Kubernetes offerings, and you're not getting locked into a particular vendor by moving to Kubernetes. As a large enterprise, you need to hire many developers, right? Thousands of developers. And if you're using an industry standard platform, you're more likely to be able to find the employees that you need to fill that. And that's how it comes back to your salary. As an engineer or somebody who's developing a service, if you're running on Kubernetes, that's good for you because the more enterprises are using it, the more they're needing employees, the more you can get a job. So at the end of the day, it does affect your salary. That's some good motivation. Another thing that we're seeing as far as the Pivotal platform and why we as a platform are excited about this is that it's a win-win for our platform. Again, this industry standard has made it, remove some of the friction from deploying your service on the platform. I don't know, has anybody in here written a Bosch release or done a Bosch deployment, tiles? Yeah. So your experience might have looked a little bit like the picture here. It can be a painful curve, and not to say that Kubernetes, isn't difficult to pick up, or there's certainly a learning curve there as well. But number one, since it is an industry standard, you're likely already doing it. Number two, if you're not, maybe you should, because it's coming up and it's everywhere, right? And then number three, the work that you can do to develop your Kubernetes offering is reusable, again, across different platforms, different infrastructure providers that all are using this industry standard Kubernetes. So that's a big part of that. And we're actually seeing some of the fruits of this already. So we did a survey of our customers that are running PKS today, and 74% of them are really targeting ISV services to run on their PKS platform. So a lot of data services, some messaging. Some of the other ones include identity and security, monitoring, metrics, logging, application level, gateway type products. So our customers want what you have, and you're getting on board with an industry standard, and you're getting paid, and these are all great things. All right, are we convinced? We motivated? Going to deliver on PKS? All right. You have to be excited, because now we're going to get into the Kubernetes deployment, and what's involved there is YAML. There's lots and lots of YAML. And of course, with YAML, I'm sure an astute reader noticed I had a white space error in there. Oh man, couldn't find it. So to deal with all this YAML, there's just a couple tools that people have written for Kubernetes to manage all these deployments and manage all this YAML and try and make it better. I think they don't let you onto GitHub anymore unless you've written one of these. But we'll go into a little bit about a couple of these that are important, kind of gain traction, and that we're seeing around. So first of all, we'll talk a little bit about the YAML we just saw, which was a Kubernetes deployment manifest, just a raw, this is the interface to Kubernetes. It's a collection of a desired state of the objects that you want to have in your deployment. So these are things like Kubernetes deployment, stateful sets, secrets, pods, etc. I'm not going to dive deep into the technicalities of the objects or what they look like or which ones you should use. I think the Kubernetes documentation is actually quite good on that, and there's examples and things online. But this is something that you deploy directly to Kubernetes. Use kubectl. Yes, I say cuddle. I don't know. I like cuddles. People say kube control and kubectl and whatever. And you can create variants for different environments with Customize, which is now built into the kubectl CLI. So one of the insights that we can take from that is that the Kubernetes interface is a very valuable abstraction. So this idea of having a desired state of resources and having the system actually reconcile the desired state with the actual state of the world. And this has kind of come out as an extension point to Kubernetes with custom resource definitions and operators. So this is the operator pattern. So it's a pattern where you bring a custom resource definition, which is basically the schema of your objects. So for example, instead of having a stateful set that represents your database cluster or a node in your database cluster, you could just have a database cluster resource type. Have the user specify that in their YAML. And then along with that comes a controller that reconciles the desired state of your database cluster to the actual state. And typically these things just build on top of existing resources. So your MySQL cluster or whatever database cluster resource will actually create a stateful set underneath it. And then the stateful set controller can go and do all the things it needs to do. And it's kind of this nice layering that you can do to build on top of the existing Kubernetes resources. And along with that, you can add in lifecycle hooks. So for example, if you are standing up a database, when you create it, you could bootstrap it with a schema. Or when you delete it, you could take a snapshot before it goes away to make sure you don't lose any data. For compliance reasons, or if you're in development and you need to stand it back up a little different, you can do stuff like that. So my teammate Aaron Meza has drawn an excellent cartoon explaining the operator pattern. There's a link here, and I just took a little snippet of it because it's got my name in it, so it's kind of fun. And then again, this pattern is documented in the Kubernetes documentation. So one of the things, another point here is that Kelsey Hightower had a tweet that was talking about how Kubernetes makes it easier to deploy services, but it doesn't manage them. So things like cluster membership, failovers, and replication, these are all things that you can kind of get more control over with this operator pattern. So that's when you might want to use it. So another tool that we see used commonly is Helm. Anyone use Helm? Helm charts? Lovers, haters? I don't know. It seems to be strong opinions around it, but Helm is basically we can think of it as a package manager for Kubernetes. And in that, you can have your YAML, you can have it templated so that you can override parts or modify parts with a values file. So you can insert different values in there for different environments or whatever you need. You can version these things so that the unit is called a Helm chart, and you can version those so that you can do upgrades and things like that. You can have a well-defined set of resources inside of a version. You can get lifecycle hooks. So the hooks that you can get are around install, delete, upgrade, and rollback. So you can do pre and post hooks for all those lifecycle events. You can have events around, hooks around tests. So if you pass tests or fail tests, Helm also has some built-in test framework there. And then also for installing a CRD. So if you have a custom resource definition that you would use in that operator pattern, have that all packaged up in a Helm chart. There's a slot in the hooks to actually install your CRD before you do anything further. Some of the considerations for using Helm is, number one is it has been largely adopted. There's a large ecosystem of open source charts. Bitnami, for example, has done a lot of work in that space. And for now, there's a server-side component called Tiller, which is a source of a lot of the controversy around Helm. It's not secure by default. There are ways of securing it. And it is going away in the next release of Helm, Helm 3. So that's some things to think about. Another point here is that these things can work together, right? This should be an and conversation, not an or conversation. I've heard a lot that people say, well, I started using Helm, but then it didn't do what I needed to do, so I wrote an operator. And to me, those things are a little bit non sequitur. Like these things are solving different aspects of the problems here. So, you could it's certainly valid to take your operator and wrap it in a Helm chart. Again, the Helm has a hook built in to deploy a custom resource definition, which is part of the operator pattern. So these things, are meant to work together, and they're often incorrectly, I would say, pitted against each other in ways that don't entirely make sense. So as you're looking at tools, these are a couple of examples, but as you're looking at these tools, really think about the space that they're trying to solve and the aspect of the problems that they're trying to solve, and look for ways that we can use them together instead of, kind of pitting them head to head. I think it'll be a lot more fruitful that way. So that's what I'm going to say about deployments. Now we'll move on to brokering. Are folks here familiar with service brokers, CF Marketplace, Open Service Broker API? Okay, it looks like half-ish. I'll go into a little bit. It might be a little remedial for some of you, but we'll go through it. So the Open Service Broker API is really targeted to this use case that I was talking about on pivotal platform type services, right? So we have developers that need self-service access to manage services. So the platform operator is managing or making available some services to application developers who need, if we want this 4 operator to 1,000 application developer ratio, these developers can't be putting in a ticket every time they need a new database. This needs to be self-service. So that's part of the value of a platform like Pivotal Platform. So the Open Service Broker API enables this by kind of standardizing the catalog, the provisioning, and the binding of these services in a self-service way by the application developers. So the API, it's quite simple. The main concepts are a catalog, which tells you what services are available and what plans are available for those services. So for something like a database, you would have perhaps plans for a shared instance or a dedicated instance, maybe plans for different sizes of databases, so how much data can you actually put into it. These things can be for resource constraints or for, if you're charging for your platform, could be for payment purposes, having different size plans for those. There's a provision endpoint, which prepares a service instance for use. So again, for a database that might stand up a new database cluster if your database is a dedicated one for an application, or it could shave off a part of a shared database if you were using a shared cluster. And then binding is the last concept we'll talk about, and that's basically providing access to an application. So you would send, again, with a database, let's say, you would send the application the endpoint and the credentials to a database, and then that application can use it. So it's a quick overview of of the Service Broker API and how it enables the self-service for application developers on a platform. Just one note is that these service instances can run anywhere. So if you're delivering your service on PKS, of course today we'll consider them running on PKS, but just in general, this could be a SaaS offering, it could be something on-prem that's off your platform, or it could be something that is running on your platform like we're talking about today. So the other side of the Open Service Broker API that we need to make this actually work is the concept of a marketplace. So this is where the application developer would go to interact with these services. So sounds like some folks here are probably familiar with, CF Marketplace, CF Create Service, CF Bind Service. That's what it looks like on the Pivotal application service side. On the Kubernetes side, if the Kubernetes application is consuming these services, there is an integration with the Open Service Broker API with the Kubernetes SIG service catalog. So they have basically translated these operations and these concepts into Kubernetes resources, and you get that declarative interface to your service offerings like that. So whether your apps are running on PaaS or on PKS, they can use this abstraction here. So. One of the things that we have recently released, just Friday, went to open beta. A lot of the team members are actually here today in this talk. The Container Services Manager for Pivotal Platform. So this was based on some insights we had, is that our services, like we saw in the little pie chart, right? Our customers want services to run on PKS. So we have our services running on Kubernetes. Our customers still run, and we still believe that Pivotal Application Service is the best place for greenfield application development. So getting cloud-native applications up and running. And we need to connect these two, right? We want our application service applications to consume these services running on Kubernetes. So another piece that leads to the solution here is that a Helm installation is automatable, so we can pretty easily take a Helm chart, install it on a PKS cluster in an automated fashion. And so this is basically what Kubernetes Service Manager puts together. So it registers with the Pivotal Application Service Marketplace. It gives access to a dynamic Helm chart offering that's managed by a platform operator. When it is asked to provision a service, it does a Helm install, basically. And when it's asked to bind a service, it takes the Kubernetes secrets and the Kubernetes service objects for that instance and shares them with the application. We can do a little massaging to make sure it looks right there, but that's kind of the basic concept, is it's sharing the credentials and the endpoint to that service with the application. So so it's in open beta now. I would highly suggest trying it out. I think it's really a cool way to get that use case of services running on PKS, making them available to applications running on the Pivotal Application Service. Here's just a graphical overview of basically what I just said. So we have applications in Pivotal Application Service, the Container Services Manager, acting as the service broker to deploy things to PKS, deploy our services to PKS, and bind them back to applications running on PaaS. So that's our story for brokering our services on PKS today. So now we'll move on to the delivery. So how do I get my bits to my customers? How does this whole thing work? So we'll start off here with some guiding principles. And these are things that we've heard from customer needs. Pivotal has a strong understanding of enterprise customers and their needs and the things that they care about and require. So one of them is they would really like to get the bits from Pivotal. They see us as kind of a trusted partner on their journey, and They want to go to Pivotal to download the products. It's part of our platform. That's kind of the key point there, is that even our ISV products are seen as part of our platform, and our platform is incomplete without them, right? They need to know the exact bits that they have for compliance. So doing something like pulling the latest image from Docker Hub is not something that a customer would like to do, because for compliance reasons, they need to go through security scanning and understand the exact bits that they have in their environment. So it's important that we enable that. The customers have air-gapped environments, and on Kubernetes in particular, this means that they need access to easily download and get the container images into their environment. So we can't be pointing at a registry that's outside of their environment to pull in their bits. This doesn't work for a large number of our customers. They need to automate everything, all the things. Download, install, upgrade, all these things should be automated, again, to enable this 4-platform operator to 1,000 application developer ratio that we strive for. We can't be doing things manually. And then, of course, keep it simple and standard, right? So the place that customers typically go to get our products is Pivotal Network. Folks familiar? Yes, no, hands, okay. We got a bunch that are, but many that aren't. Okay, so Pivotal Network is, we call it PivNet for short. It is our distribution site for all of our products. So both Pivotal products are there as well as our partner products. We have automation built around it both for publishing releases and downloading them, so pushing and pulling. It's where our customers prefer to get our software, like I said, and here's just a little screenshot of the blurb on the section of PivNet that has our partner services on it. So this is something that's out there today. Yeah, and so like I said, it's automated. We can tie it in with either the API, or we have actually a built-in resource in our Concourse CI system that interacts with PivNet in an automated way, can get releases, publish releases, all that stuff. So if that's a place to put our releases, what do we want to put there? So one option, which is actually a little bit of a wild card today, I think, is the Cloud Native Application Bundle. So the specification came out of Microsoft and Docker. It's a packaging format for cloud native workloads, basically. So it has install, upgrade, uninstall capabilities. The kind of key to the whole thing is that it runs what's called an invocation image. So this is just a container image that runs when you're doing these lifecycle events of installing, uninstalling, upgrading. So in that way, it's pretty open-ended. So you can do whatever you want in that invocation image. I don't know what that was. No worries. It supports both thick images, or thick bundles and thin bundles. So thick bundles would have the actual image bits in there for everything it would need. Thin bundles would just be a reference to some image registry, image repository. So some considerations here is, number one, it's not widely adopted yet as far as we've seen, but some Pivotal products will be delivering via a CNAB bundle, so it's interesting that way. There are some concerns around the invocation image security. So like I said, you're basically getting this image that can do whatever it's going to do in your environment. So there's some concerns about risk there. Is it any more or better or worse than anything else that, it needs to install somehow, somewhere, right? So there's some concerns around there. We'll see if they can tighten that up or how it pans out. On the positive side, it's a good, very open, and it'll fit pretty much any use case that you have to package up. Like I said, this invocation image is ultimately flexible. And then it does provide a nice, consistent interface for installing, upgrading, deleting products. So these are some considerations here. Yeah, so this is an interesting thing, maybe something to keep an eye on. And like I said, the Pivotal products will be delivered with it, so there may be some traction there. We shall see. So Pivotal Network is also constructing a container registry to be attached to it. So this is the standard image registry that Docker Hub and Key.io and things like that. So it's very standard, and it gives our service authors and our customers this very familiar Docker push, Docker pull model of transferring images around. It integrates with Pivotal Network for authentication and EULA acceptance and automation. So we've actually started building some of the API and the concourse interactions into our tooling, so it's easy to automate. It's implemented as a deployment of VMware Harbor. It's a work in progress, and the team would like feedback or like to work with you, or if you're interested in trying this out, or maybe being an early adopter, to give feedback and see what we can do there. Just to walk through what that might look like, you would Docker log in using your PivNet account details, Docker push to add the image just from the release author point of view, right? So you would push your image up there, and then when you make a release on PivNet, you are able to add your product files. So with a release, you can add files, and you can add a reference to this Docker image on our Pivotal registry. And then, that's the basic flow there. The release would also include some sort of either Helm chart, or perhaps a CNAB thin bundle, or some other means of the deployment definition, since that's not included with the image necessarily. So there would be a little bit more to the story there. And then on the consuming side, a customer would come in, find your product on PivNet, and again do this Docker. They would get a Docker pull command, and then they could do a Docker login and run the Docker pull to get your image. We expect that customers, again, a lot of them are air-gapped, or a lot of them have other process around pulling in software into their environment. So we would expect that they would clone that image into their own registry, and then do whatever scanning or compliance things they would need to do, and then actually deploy off of that copy in their own registry. But that's kind of the flow that we're seeing today. So we'll move on now to logistics about our partner program, how we get started, and how we go from here. So the first bit is where we should all start today is we should start with the VMware validation. To do that, we would, so as we know, PKS is a joint venture between Pivotal and VMware, and we all know the news that Pivotal and VMware are likely to be coming together soon. So this is our guidance right now. We've had some meetings, not about how we come together, but about how to reduce any confusion or concern that there is today on how these things are going to work today. So the first thing you should do is start with the VMware validation. You join their technical alliance program. There's an onboarding guide to fill out. Once you're in their program there, VMware will actually provide you a PKS environment to test out your product. So there's a self-validation guide, so you get a document that tells you what you need to do to validate. You send the logs over to VMware upon completion, and they review them, make sure everything looks good, and then we're set. So that'll get you into the VMware Solutions Exchange and get you started on the path. So there will be a revalidation. I think it's still a little up in the air what that will look like exactly, but I think we're thinking minimum annually, personal opinion, with the rate of change of Kubernetes, I think it may make sense to revalidate every Kubernetes release. It would make sense to me. Once you're in the VMware Partner Program, we can add you into the Pivotal Services Marketplace. So this is where customers can learn about products that are available on the platform. It's kind of the marketing counterpart to PivNet. So PivNet is our download and distribution site. Pivotal Services Marketplace has more marketing type information about our products and about how they work, what they do, any joint marketing materials, that kind of thing. And in there, it would, of course, include a link to your distribution so that a customer, once they read through your product, they could go right to download it. Link there to the Pivotal Services Marketplace. So going a little deeper, we're all still learning, right? This Kubernetes, it's taking off. Has become the industry standard. But I think we all are still learning about all this, what it means, right? So as new customer concerns come up, and Pivotal is, again, familiar with enterprise customers, and if we can work together to address new customer concerns, or I'm certain we'll find new integration points, new types of services that could be integrated into Kubernetes that we haven't really had the experience with yet. And as we learn new techniques and tools and patterns as the space evolves, it's a quickly evolving space. It's a very crowded space, like we've seen with the number of tools out there. As these things progress, we would love to engage directly with our service authors and go a bit deeper, focused around getting customer outcomes and really learning together and coming up with some things, patterns, practices, all kinds of stuff. So that's really kind of, let's work together, reach out, let's figure out how to make all this work in the new world. All right, so we'll do a quick summary of what we talked about here. So Kubernetes is, one of the big takeaways I hope I made the impression of is Kubernetes is the industry standard. It's good for all humankind, and it's good for your paycheck. Get your Kubernetes deployment going, wrangle your YAML. That's a very crowded space with a lot of tools. Operators are one of those patterns that we can use to help control the life cycle of your product, manage your service, and help make other people's YAML wrangling a little easier by having a specific resource for your particular service. Helm, we think of that simply as the Kubernetes package manager. And these tools, again, they solve different aspects of the problems. They have different concerns, and we should think of them as working together where they can, and think of it as maybe an and not an or. Brokering, so we need our application developers to have self-service access to services. We need to, if we have services running on Kubernetes and we want them to be consumed by applications on PaaS, we can look at Container Services Manager, Pivotal Platform. Give that open beta a look. For delivery, we need to focus on our customer needs, kind of go through those guiding principles of automation and consistency and validation and things. So, the couple of points that are particularly interesting there are CNAB, keep an eye on it, might be something good, and the Pivotal Network Registry, which is up and coming and should be here soon. If you're interested again in giving feedback on that on early versions, please talk to us. And then for the logistics, we start with the VMware validation. We can get on Pivotal Services Marketplace once it's VMware validated, and we'll, let's talk if we can learn together and solve new customer problems. So with that, thank you for coming. It's good to see so many people here at Spring One. It's good to see so many people here listening about delivering your service on PKS. I hope you've found this useful or insightful or walked away with at least a little nugget of information that you didn't have before. I want to give a shout out to the folks that I borrowed slide content from or content. So Maggie, Aaron, and Amit, thank you all. Much appreciated. From here on out, let's, again, stay connected. Let's continue this conversation. We would like to get feedback on some of these new tools and new technologies that we're working with. We would like to get, go deeper with you on solving customer problems. And you can find me email if you're a Pivotal partner. You can find me on Pivotal Partner Slack. Find me on the Twitters here. Just wanted to pitch one related session about building reliable services on Kubernetes. So that's tomorrow at 3:20. The Pivotal Rabbit MQ team will be talking about, kind of their journey to getting a service up and running on PKS. So I'm sure they'll have good insight there as well. So thank you again. I think we have some time to take some questions if anybody has any questions. On
the Docker pull, Docker push, what was that again?
The question was the Docker pull, Docker push. That was on the PivNet registry.
PivNet registry. So this is a thing where I can come up with a container and I can push it up there and this guy over here can pull it down?
Yeah, so the question was, is this PivNet registry, is this something where I could push a container up and have somebody else pull it down? Yes, it's very similar in concept to like Docker Hub, where you could, you would be authorized, of course, to push an image and be authorized to pull it down. But yes, that is the idea.
So are you going to be mandating that when I do Docker push, that I also publish the Docker file along with it and the code along with it?
So the question was, will you mandate that we push the code along with it, the Docker file and the code for the image? I don't believe so. The image, there is certainly some paperwork we need to do in order to redistribute your software. So that would look like a open source disclosure form and things like that. But we have not required our partners to include the source code with their packages. I don't think that's something we would do. That answer your question?
That answers my question.
All right, thank you. Yes?
So with Container Service Manager, so is there, the concept was deploy apps on PaaS and then run service PKS. Is there plans or ways to tie it into where applications running on PKS by taking advantage of that?
Good question. So the question was on Container Services Manager. We are saying today it's for apps running on PaaS and the service running on PKS. Are there any plans, or can we leverage that to integrate with apps running on Kubernetes? I believe that is in the roadmap. Amy? Yes, I see a thumbs up. Amy is our product manager in the back here for Container Services Manager. As part of the Pivotal Marketplace. Okay, so there's a related effort coming up to unify the Pivotal Marketplace. I'll try not to digress too much here, but right now customers typically have several PaaS foundations, and they manage the marketplace independently, for each one of those they have an independent marketplace, and we're trying to extract that out into one kind of centralized view. So this is what we're calling the new Pivotal Marketplace. So it sounds like as part of that, we'll be exploring the idea of applications running on Kubernetes and consuming the services running on Kubernetes as well. All right, thank you. Other questions? Yes?
So we've got a couple apps that we're finding we're using their deployment teams to PKS.
Mm-hmm. Interesting question. So the question was, we have applications running on Pivotal Application Service. Those applications are used by other applications running on Pivotal Application Service. When should we consider, maybe taking those out and running them as a service versus as an application? This is basically the question. That's an interesting question. I would think So I think we've made some strides recently in application service to connect, make that connection with container to container networking and features like that. And if you can maintain those services as a proper cloud native 12-factor application as it runs on top of the platform, my initial guidance at least would be continue running them that way. If you take them, kind of down a level to either running them just as containers or, maybe on Bosch or something, you lose out on, we want to try and keep it that highest level of abstraction as we can for our applications. Just, it makes them easier to manage. You get the scaling and all the benefits you get by not having to worry about the lower level issues there. So I guess I would, at least initially, not knowing all the details, I would say try and stay at that higher level abstraction as much as you can. Make sense? All right, thank you. Other questions? Yes?
So the service broker, open service broker API is great because I can write a service broker for any cloud service front end. That way I can auto provision services.
Mm-hmm.
However I want for developers. Are operators only for within the constraints of Kubernetes, or are operators eventually going to replace that open service broker API?
That's a great question. So the question was, open service broker API, it's a great thing. You get this auto provisioning, self-service aspects of it. How about operators? Operators kind of seem to overlap that a bit. And as a developer, if I can just put down a CRD that gives me the service I need, is that going to overtake the open service broker API? So the one thing that I think the Kubernetes world has not figured out yet is that service binding aspect, right? So I think that's kind of one piece that the service broker API still has. I imagine this is something that will get figured out eventually in the Kubernetes world for applications on Kubernetes to bind to services running on Kubernetes or running elsewhere too, right? So I think once Kubernetes gets this application binding concept figured out, I think at that point we'll have to take a long, hard look at the open service broker and see if it still has a place. Until that happens, I think that service binding piece is still missing. I guess that would be my opinion for today. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and is there any thought of potentially so you have your open service broker API service. Is there any thought of having some sort of Kubernetes construct that is, going to just call out to that open service broker API and provision all of the resources and CRDs necessary for your application automatically? Basically, some sort of translation layer from OSB API to Kubernetes.
Yeah. So the question was, is there some sort of translation layer between open service broker and Kubernetes? And that's actually, if we go back, there's this service catalog is actually here we go. So on the rightmost column here, we can see this on Pivotal Container Service. This is a general Kubernetes thing. It's not just PKS. So these objects here actually map to these service broker concepts. So you can create, when you register a service broker, there's actually another object for a service broker that contains everything it needs to talk to the service broker. Then that populates these cluster service class, cluster service plan. And then as a developer, you could declare, you could include a service instance object in some YAML, apply it to your environment, and then a service binding object, and again, apply it to your environment. I don't know the details off the top of my head about the exact kind of flow of that, but that service binding object is like basically that concept in Kubernetes. The SIG service catalog, there's been a little bit of uncertainty around that. there's been a little bit of churn in there, I think, and another kind of to be seen how that ends up.
So this is in direct competition with the operator.
The question was, this is in direct competition with the operator pattern. Again, I think they're slightly different concerns. You could have an operator implemented that actually, you could do these things with an operator, and this actually, I think they're removing, this is an operator, but, I think eventually, like I said, when they get the service binding thing figured out, if operators are managing this workflow, I think you're kind of hinting towards that. I think, we would expect, and some of the cloud providers actually have started retiring their service brokers for something, custom resources, operators. So we are seeing some of that. We shall see once the story is more complete, I guess. Thank you. I saw a hand here, yes?
Just out of curiosity, what's the
Difference between the service broker pattern and Istio. I frankly do not know a lot about Istio. My understanding of it is it's wiring things together. I don't know that it has kind of the provisioning aspect to it. I don't know that it has the credential aspect to it, but anybody Istio expert have an answer?
Yeah, so it doesn't. So Istio plays on network layer, right? So it is the enabler of networking on Kubernetes. For example, setting up, it doesn't go up to layer 7, but layer 4, layer 7, all the network aspects of Kubernetes. So it's open source, service mesh kind of product. It's nothing to do with the service mesh.
So the answer was Istio is basically just networking type access. It doesn't give like just provisioning and binding concepts. It's just network access. Thank you. I think that was just more about, network access versus binding. I didn't catch all of what was said there, but.
there's a lot going on here. It's just there's a lot of pieces.
Right. Anybody else? All right. Thank you very much.